At 74, I expected my son to bring groceries. Instead, Caleb slid guardianship petition papers across my kitchen table, already signed on his line, with a sticky note that read, "Your bank, Logan's. Hi, dear ones. Grace here." When a grown child wraps greed in the word custody, it hits like a cold slap. If you were me, would you sign or fight? Tell me in the comments. My fingers tightened around my teacup. The kitchen still smelled like butter and madeleines, the kind that make you feel safe. For a second, I stared at the word guardianship like it was written in another language. It didn't belong in my house. Caleb leaned back in my chair like he owned it. "Mom, this is for your own good," he said, voice smooth and practiced. "You've been slipping. I'm stepping up." "I'm not slipping," I said. "I paid my bills yesterday." He nodded as if I'd proven his point. "And you can keep living here. I just handle the money. No more scams. No more mistakes." "Who put this in your head?" I asked. "The people who take this seriously," he replied. "The bank, the court, adult protective services. If you sign today, it's easy. If you don't, I file it without you." My throat went dry. "You'd take me to court?" "I'd protect you. That's what a good son does." He pushed a second folder toward me. My statements, highlighted, groceries, utilities, a check to the church. Then 3 charges I didn't recognize at all: a luxury steakhouse downtown, a watch store, and an online electronics shop. "I didn't do these," I said. Caleb watched my face, not the paper. "Exactly," he murmured. "You don't even remember where your money goes. That's why custody matters." It landed with a sick little clarity. He wasn't showing me a problem. He was building a case. I slid the folder back. "If I've been robbed, we call the fraud department. We don't hand the thief the keys." His mouth tightened. "Don't start?" "Start?" I felt heat rise under my skin. "You walked in here with court papers like I'm something you can rehome." Caleb stood and, without asking, lifted my checkbook from the ceramic dish by the phone. "You shouldn't leave this out," he said, tucking it under his arm. "Put that back," I said. He didn't. He only glanced at his watch. "You have until tomorrow morning. If you don't sign, you'll look combative in front of the judge. Think about that." The door clicked behind him. My kitchen went quiet, except for the refrigerator's hum and the tick of the clock above the sink. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Don't stress yourself out. I'm doing this because I care." I opened my banking app, needing to see my own numbers, something solid. The screen flashed. Password incorrect. I tried again. Same. On the 3rd attempt, it locked me out for 30 minutes. My hands went cold. I hadn't changed my password in years. I went to the drawer where I kept my documents. Deeds, insurance, the neat folder labeled estate. The folder was there, but the small envelope inside, the one with my backup passwords in my careful cursive, was gone. Caleb had been in my house before I even brewed the tea. I didn't cry. Crying could come later. Right now, I needed my mind sharp and my spine straight. I washed my cup, dried it, put it back, because my hands needed something steady to do. Then I gathered his papers, slid them into my purse, and sat down like I was bracing for a storm. When I called Riverside Community Bank, a woman answered. "Riverside, this is Talia. How can I help you?" "This is Ruth Carver," I said. "I need to freeze every account I own, right now." Her voice went careful. She verified my identity, asked her questions, listened to my answers. I could hear keys tapping on her end, fast and nervous. I'm placing a temporary hold on outgoing transfers and new beneficiaries, she said. You'll need to come in with ID to make it permanent. Mrs. Carver, I also see recent access that wasn't from your usual device. I can't discuss details over the phone, but I strongly recommend you come into the branch first thing tomorrow. My knees went weak, but my mind went sharp. 8:30, I said, and put a note on my file. If anyone calls claiming to be my custodian, you tell them Ruth Carver is wide awake. When I hung up, the house felt different, not cozy, strategic. I locked the doors, set my purse by the bed, and stared at the ceiling until my banking app finally let me try again. I didn't care about the password anymore. I cared about the fight. I got up and laid out my driver's license, passport, and the little notebook where I tracked every deposit and withdrawal the way some people track calories. I packed a thermos of chamomile with a strip of satsuma peel, set my alarm for 6 o'clock, and promised myself one thing. Tomorrow, my son would learn that custody was not a leash. I was standing outside Riverside Community Bank 10 minutes before it opened, thermos warm in my hands, watching the reflection of the street in the glass. I didn't look confused. I didn't look fragile. I looked like a woman who knew exactly why she was there. When the doors unlocked at 8:30, I walked straight to the counter. "Talia?" I asked. A young woman with sharp eyes lifted her head. "Mrs. Carver?" "That's me." She led me into a small office with frosted glass walls. The air smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon cleaner. She closed the door and lowered her voice. "I pulled your account logs after our call," she said. "There were 2 password reset attempts from a device not previously associated with you. One successful login yesterday afternoon. A new external transfer request was initiated but not completed." My pulse thudded once, hard. "Where was the device?" "Registered to a local IP. I can't disclose more without a formal fraud investigation, but I can say it wasn't your usual tablet." "I don't own a tablet," I said evenly. "And I was home baking madeleines yesterday afternoon?" She nodded. "I've flagged the account. We can add a verbal password, dual authentication, and restrict any power of attorney additions without in-person verification." "Do all of it," I said. "And remove any pending beneficiary changes." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. There was an attempt to add a cosigner. "Name?" She hesitated. "Caleb Carver." The room went very quiet. "He's my son," I said, "and he does not have my permission." Talia met my eyes. "Understood." I signed 3 forms, each one crisp and deliberate. Fraud affidavit, account restriction order, device blacklist. My handwriting didn't shake once. "Mrs. Carver," she added carefully. "There was also a call yesterday from someone identifying himself as your concerned family member. He asked about procedures for guardianship-linked access. Did you give him anything?" "Only general information, no account specifics." "Good," I said. "If he calls again, you note the time and the number. I'll need records." She blinked. "You're planning something." "I'm protecting myself." Before I could stand, the office phone rang. Talia glanced at the screen. Her expression shifted. "It's him." "Put it on speaker," I said. She hesitated only a second before pressing the button. "Riverside Community Bank, this is Talia." A familiar voice filled the small room. Smooth, controlled. "Yes, this is Caleb Carver. I'm following up on my mother's accounts. I believe she's in cognitive decline, and I'd like to ensure her finances are safeguarded under my supervision." I felt something cold settle into my spine. "Sir," Talia said professionally, "for privacy reasons I can't." "She gets confused," Caleb continued, his tone practiced. She's been making erratic transactions. I'm filing for guardianship this week. It would be helpful if the bank cooperated proactively. I leaned forward. Caleb? Silence. Mom? His voice changed instantly, sharper. What are you doing there? Opening my eyes, I replied. You're embarrassing yourself. No, I said calmly. You're embarrassing yourself. The bank has flagged unauthorized access from your device. They have records of your inquiry about control over my accounts. You walked into my house with court papers and took my checkbook. That is not protection. That is premeditation. Talia's eyes widened slightly. You're twisting things, Caleb snapped. I'm trying to prevent you from ruining your retirement. My retirement, I said, is not a piñata you get to swing at. His breath came louder through the speaker. You don't understand how serious this is. I understand perfectly, I said. You tried to change my password. You attempted to add yourself as co-signer. You're laying groundwork to claim I'm incompetent. There was a pause, just long enough. You always dramatize, he muttered. I'm documenting, I corrected. Talia cleared her throat. Sir, any further discussion about Mrs. Carver's accounts will require her explicit written authorization. At this time, access is restricted. Caleb's voice went icy. Fine, then I'll see you in court. The line clicked dead. For a moment, neither of us spoke. You handled that very clearly, Talia said quietly. I raised him, I replied. I know his tells. She printed the transaction log for me, every timestamp, every attempted reset, every digital footprint. I slid the papers into my purse with the guardianship petition. As I stood to leave, she added, If you're considering legal action, you may want to request a full access history report. It can support a fraud claim. I will, I said. Outside, the sun was higher now, glinting off windshields. I didn't feel small walking back to my car. I felt precise. My phone buzzed again. Caleb, you're making a mistake. I typed back only 3 words. Not this time. Caleb didn't wait for court. He was standing on my porch when I got home from the bank, leaning against the railing like he'd never tried to take my life apart before breakfast. My checkbook was back in his hand. You really froze the accounts? He asked as I stepped out of the car. Yes. That's extreme. No, I said, locking the door with deliberate care. Extreme is filing to control your mother's money without her consent. He followed me up the steps. I told you, this is about safety. Then why did you change my password? He didn't answer that. Instead, he held up the checkbook. You left this out again. You're proving my point. I left it in my drawer, I corrected. The one in my kitchen. The one inside my house. He stiffened. Are you accusing me of stealing from you? I'm accusing you of moving pieces on a board I didn't agree to play on. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mom, listen to me carefully. If you fight this, it will get ugly. Judges don't like stubborn elderly people who refuse help. You could lose everything. I already almost did, I said. His jaw tightened. You're not thinking clearly. I was clear enough to ask the bank for device logs. There it was again. That flicker behind his eyes. Calculation, not concern. You're spiraling, he said softly. You think everyone's against you. No, I replied. Just you. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. You're going to drag this into court? Over a few protective measures? Over fraud, I said. His smile disappeared. Be very careful with that word. Be very careful with my money, I shot back. For a second, I thought he might shout. Instead, he switched tactics. You know what people will think, he said quietly. That I tried to help my aging mother, and she lashed out because she's paranoid. They'll side with me. People, I said, don't see what happens in kitchens. He moved past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. That alone would have broken my heart once. Now it only sharpened me. Mom, he said, glancing around, you can't manage this place alone. The stairs, the paperwork, the bills. You left 3 envelopes unopened on the counter. They're advertisements, I said. How would you know? You don't even remember the steakhouse charge. The one I didn't make? I asked calmly. His shoulders went rigid. I printed the transaction history, I continued. Yesterday, at 2:14 p.m., someone accessed my account from a device registered to this town. I was in my kitchen. Alone. He exhaled slowly. Circumstantial. So are guardianship petitions, I replied. He ran a hand through his hair. You think suing me is going to fix this? You want to be the mother who drags her son through court? I want to be the woman who keeps her autonomy. Autonomy? He repeated, almost mocking. You can't even reset your own password. I don't need to reset it, I said. I need to prove who tried. He stared at me like he was seeing someone unfamiliar. Fine, he said at last. Have it your way. I'll let the judge decide who's competent. You do that, I replied. He walked to the door, then paused. By the way, he added without turning around, I already spoke to Aunt Linda and Pastor Raymond. They're worried about you. Of course he had. Good, I said evenly. Then they can come see how steady my hands are. The door shut behind him. For a moment, the house felt smaller than it ever had. I sat at the table where he'd laid out those papers and spread them in front of me again. Guardianship, custody, incapacity. Each word tried to shrink me. I pulled out my little notebook and began writing a timeline. Yesterday, 1:30 p.m., baking, 2 p.m., phone call from the pharmacy, 2:14 p.m., unauthorized login, 4:05 p.m., Caleb visit, checkbook missing, details are oxygen in a fire. Then I opened my laptop and searched 3 words. Elder financial abuse attorney. 5 names appeared. I didn't hesitate. If Caleb wanted court, I would meet him there. But I would not arrive alone. By noon, I was sitting in a quiet office that smelled faintly of leather and fresh paper, across from a woman named Dana Whitmore. She looked to be in her early 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. The plaque on her desk read, Elder Law and Financial Litigation. I don't have dementia, I began, placing Caleb's guardianship petition in front of her. She skimmed it without emotion. That's rarely the opening line of someone who does, she said dryly. Tell me what happened. So I did. The password reset. The attempted co-signer addition. The missing envelope. The steakhouse charge I never made. I handed her the printed transaction logs from the bank and my handwritten timeline. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she folded her hands. Has your son ever had financial trouble? Yes, I said. Credit cards. A failed restaurant venture. Something about a private equity opportunity that collapsed. Debt? He never tells me numbers. She nodded. Guardianship petitions can be legitimate. They can also be strategic. If he establishes you as legally incompetent, he controls your assets, including property, investments, everything. He called it custody, I said quietly. That's emotional framing, she replied. Legally, it's authority. I felt a flicker of anger. Authority. over me. What are my options? I asked. We move fast, Dana said. First, you revoke any prior power of attorney documents, if they exist. I never signed one. Good. Second, we request a full forensic access history from the bank. Third, we prepare a competency evaluation, independent, not court-appointed. You think it will come to that? If he files formally, yes. I straightened in my chair. He said he would. Then we assume he will. She pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. Have you ever added him to your accounts in any capacity? No. Has he had physical access to your home recently? Yes. Did he know where you stored passwords? Yes. Did you confront him? Yes. She looked up at me. Did he deny accessing your account? He called it circumstantial. A faint smile touched her lips. That's not a denial. She stood and walked to a small filing cabinet, retrieving a document packet. Mrs. Carver, if there are unauthorized transactions tied to his device, this shifts from family dispute to potential financial exploitation. The word exploitation settled heavy in the room. I don't want to destroy him, I said. You want to protect yourself, she corrected. She slid the packet toward me. Retainer agreement. Once signed, I can formally notify the bank and request preserved logs. I can also send a cease and desist letter regarding harassment or intimidation. He's already calling relatives, I said. Pastor Raymond, too. Good, she replied calmly. Good? Witnesses. I hadn't thought of that. Dana leaned back in her chair. The biggest mistake people make in these cases is hesitating because the aggressor is family. You cannot outmaneuver someone who's willing to escalate unless you accept the escalation exists. I picked up her pen. It felt heavier than it should have. If I fight him, I said, he'll say I'm unstable. He'll say that anyway, she replied. That landed clean. I signed. She didn't smile. She simply took the papers, clipped them neatly, and said, I'll file a preservation notice with the bank today. Also, I recommend locking down your estate, a revocable living trust with an independent trustee. It prevents unilateral control even if a guardianship petition proceeds. You think he'd go that far? I think he already has. There was no drama in her voice, just assessment. As I left her office, my phone buzzed again, a voicemail from Aunt Linda. Ruth, honey, Caleb says you're refusing help. He sounds very worried. Of course he did. I didn't call her back yet. Instead, I drove home, made myself a simple lunch, tomato soup with cracked pepper and a slice of sourdough, and laid out a new folder on my dining table. Label, Defense. I placed inside it guardianship petition, bank transaction logs, my timeline, Dana's business card. Then I opened my laptop and ordered something else, a small home security system with camera logs stored off-site. If anyone entered my house again, I wanted it time-stamped. By late afternoon, an email notification appeared. Subject: Guardianship filing, case number assigned. He hadn't waited. I exhaled slowly, once. If Caleb wanted to argue about my competence, I would show him what competence looked like under pressure. The pressure didn't come from Caleb directly the next day. It came wearing softer faces. Aunt Linda arrived first, clutching a tin of biscotti like she was bringing peace offerings instead of suspicion. She stepped into my kitchen and looked around too carefully. "Oh, Ruth," she sighed. "Why are you fighting him? He's just worried." "About what?" I asked, pouring her coffee into my blue Delft mug. My ability to butter toast? She winced. He says you've been forgetting things. That you're confused about money. I'm confused about why my son tried to add himself as co-signer to my bank account. Her fingers tightened around the cup. He told me the bank recommended it. Banks don't recommend secret password resets, I said evenly. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Ruth, she tried again, lowering her voice, if you drag this through court, it will tear the family apart. Then perhaps it wasn't I who started the tearing. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Pastor Raymond stood there, hat in hand, expression solemn. Caleb was nowhere in sight, but his fingerprints were on this. Ruth, the pastor began gently once he stepped inside, Caleb is deeply concerned about your well-being. He says you've been resistant to assistance. Assistance, I repeated. Yes. He mentioned unusual spending, anxiety, isolation. I baked madeleines yesterday, I said calmly. Does that qualify as instability? The pastor shifted uncomfortably. You must understand, the court will want assurance. And what assurance would satisfy them? I asked. He looked surprised by the sharpness in my tone. Medical evaluations, clear-headed financial oversight, transparency. Good, I said. I've already scheduled an independent competency assessment, and my attorney is requesting forensic banking records. Aunt Linda blinked. Attorney? Yes, I replied. If someone accuses you of incapacity, you don't respond with tea. You respond with documentation. The pastor studied me more closely now, not as a frail woman, but as someone who had anticipated the move. Ruth, he said quietly, are you certain this isn't escalating unnecessarily? I met his gaze without wavering. Pastor, if someone entered your home, accessed your accounts, and filed to take legal control of your finances without your consent, would you call that necessary? Silence. Aunt Linda set her cup down carefully. He said you'd react like this. Like what? I asked. Defensive. Aggressive. I almost smiled. I am not aggressive. I am organized. The truth was simpler. Caleb had begun laying a narrative. Concerned son, declining mother, protective action, and now he was spreading it through trusted voices, letting it ferment. Has he told you, I continued softly, that the bank flagged unauthorized device access tied to this town? Neither of them answered. Has he told you I have printed transaction logs, that I froze my accounts before any transfer cleared? The pastor's brows drew together. He didn't mention that. Of course he hadn't. I stood and walked to the hallway, returning with the folder labeled Defense. I laid the documents out on the table, methodical. Read, I said simply. Aunt Linda leaned forward first. Her eyes moved over the timestamps, the attempted co-signer addition, the fraud affidavit. The pastor followed. I didn't rush them. I let the paper speak. After a long minute, Aunt Linda whispered, He said you imagined things. I imagined timestamps? I asked. The pastor exhaled slowly. This complicates matters. It clarifies them, I corrected. Aunt Linda looked shaken now. Ruth, if this is true, it is, I said. The knock on the door came again, harder this time. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Caleb. He stepped in without waiting, eyes flicking from me to the pastor, to the open documents on the table. What's going on? He demanded. Transparency, I replied. His gaze landed on the transaction logs. For the briefest second, Something like alarm flashed across his face. Then it vanished. "You're poisoning them against me," he said. "No," I answered calmly. "I'm preventing you from poisoning them against me." Aunt Linda rose slowly. "Caleb, why didn't you mention the bank logs?" He didn't look at her. He was staring at me. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "I already regret trusting you," I replied. The room felt tight, charged. This wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. It was a narrative war. And for the first time, I could see cracks forming in his. The official knock came 2 mornings later. Not Caleb. Not Aunt Linda. Not anyone soft. 2 officers stood on my porch, neutral expressions, hands resting calmly near their belts. A patrol car idled at the curb like a punctuation mark. "Mrs. Ruth Carver?" one of them asked. "Yes." "We received a request for a welfare check." "Of course we did." "From my son?" I asked. They exchanged a glance. "Yes, ma'am." I stepped aside. "Please, come in." I didn't flinch. I didn't protest. I invited them into my kitchen, where the sunlight fell clean across the table. The kettle was already on. I'd been steeping loose-leaf Darjeeling in my little porcelain infuser, the one shaped like a lotus. "Have a seat," I said. They remained standing. "Ma'am," the taller officer began carefully, "your son expressed concern that you may not be managing daily activities safely. He mentioned confusion, possible financial vulnerability." "I see," I said calmly. "Would you like to inspect the house?" They did. They looked at the stove, off, the refrigerator, stocked, medications organized in a labeled weekly dispenser. The living room, tidy. No stacked newspapers, no unpaid notices spilling from drawers. "Do you know today's date?" the shorter officer asked gently. "October 12th, I replied without hesitation. "Wednesday. The temperature will hit 71 by 3 p.m., according to the forecast." He blinked once, almost embarrassed. "Who is the current governor?" the taller one asked. I answered. Then the mayor, then the president. "Do you manage your own finances?" he continued. "Yes. And I have documentation of attempted unauthorized access, if you'd like to see it." That caught their attention. I retrieved the defense folder and placed it on the table again. Transaction logs, fraud affidavit, guardianship filing notification, attorney contact information. They studied it carefully. "Your son claimed you were being targeted by scammers," the shorter officer said. "I am," I replied evenly. "One of them shares my last name." Silence. The taller officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, based on what we see, you appear oriented and capable." "I appreciate that," I said. "However," he added, "if a guardianship petition has been filed, the court may request an independent evaluation." "I've already scheduled one," I said. "Privately?" They both looked mildly impressed. As they turned to leave, the shorter officer paused. "Mrs. Carver, if someone is attempting financial exploitation, you can file a formal report." "I intend to." When the door closed behind them, I didn't sit down immediately. I stood very still, letting the quiet settle back into place. My phone buzzed. "Caleb, they told me you embarrassed them." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then another one came. "Caleb, this is getting out of control." Out of control. Because I had answered questions coherently. Because my stove was clean. Because my accounts were frozen before he could drain them. I typed carefully. "Ruth, you sent the police to test my sanity. They left satisfied. 3 dots appeared instantly, then vanished. A third message arrived. Caleb, you're forcing my hand. I felt something shift inside me then. Not fear, not anger, resolve. I walked to the hallway and opened the small cabinet where I kept old photo albums. Caleb at 5 years old, grinning through missing teeth. Caleb at 16, holding a basketball trophy. Caleb at 28, smiling stiffly at my retirement dinner. Somewhere between those photos and now, entitlement had taken root. I closed the album gently. If he believed a welfare check would rattle me, he underestimated the woman who taught him how to read. That afternoon, Dana called. They requested a court-ordered cognitive assessment, she said. Standard procedure once police documentation exists. I already have one scheduled, I replied. Good. Make sure it's thorough. Memory, executive function, financial reasoning. Do you think he expected this? He expected you to crumble, she said. I looked around my kitchen, the same table, the same clock, ticking steadily above the sink. I hadn't crumbled. I had documented, and now there was a police report stating I was competent, not emotional. Competent. This was no longer about whispers. It was becoming evidence. The independent evaluation was scheduled for Friday morning. But Thursday night, I found what Caleb had been hoping I wouldn't. It started with something small, my credit card statement. I wasn't even looking for it. I was reviewing my checking account activity again, cross-referencing timestamps with my notebook, when I noticed a pending charge on my Visa. A boutique electronics retailer. $2,489. I hadn't bought anything electronic in years. My television still had buttons on the side. I called the number on the back of the card. After navigating through the polite maze of automated voices, I reached a fraud specialist named Martin. Mrs. Carver, I see the charge, he said. Placed online. Overnight shipping requested. Where was it sent? I asked. He hesitated. For security reasons, I can't disclose the full address until verification is complete. But I can confirm it was local. Local, I repeated. Yes, ma'am. Has this card been used from a new device recently? Let me check. Yes. Yesterday evening. I closed my eyes briefly. Yesterday evening, I had been home, rereading the guardianship filing notification. I need the transaction frozen, I said. It's pending, so we can block settlement. I'll cancel the shipment as well. Please do. There was a pause. Mrs. Carver. I also see 2 smaller test charges earlier this week. $5.99, $11. Those usually precede larger purchases. Of course they did. He walked me through filing the formal fraud report. I gave him the case number from the bank. I gave him Dana's contact information. When I hung up, I didn't feel shocked. I felt confirmed. Caleb hadn't just attempted to access my checking account. He had been testing my credit line too. I walked to the desk drawer in my bedroom and retrieved the small metal box where I kept old financial documents. Inside were copies of my credit reports from 2 years ago. I opened my laptop and requested fresh ones. While waiting, I made chamomile tea again, but added a strip of ginger this time. My hands were steady. The reports came through. 2 new inquiries appeared in the last 10 days. A high-limit rewards card application, a personal line of credit. Both declined. My heart didn't race. It slowed. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. He had tried to expand access quietly before the guardianship process concluded. If he secured legal control, those applications would have looked like responsible planning. If he didn't, he would have had a fallback. I opened my security system app. Installation confirmation for tomorrow morning. Good. I picked up my phone and called Dana. He's testing my credit, I said without preamble. Charges? She asked. Yes, electronics. Overnight shipping. 2 earlier microtransactions. Cancel everything. Save documentation. Already done. She was silent for a moment. This strengthens your position. It strengthens my certainty, I replied. Ruth, she said carefully, are you prepared for the possibility that this moves beyond civil court? You mean criminal? If the evidence supports intentional exploitation, yes. The word hung in the air. Criminal. My son. I stared at the framed photo on my bookshelf, the one from his college graduation. He had looked proud, hopeful. When does concern become theft? I asked quietly. When access becomes unauthorized, she said. There was a knock at my door. My stomach tightened, but when I checked the porch camera feed on my phone, it wasn't Caleb. It was a delivery driver. I opened the door. Package for Caleb Carver? He read from the label, confused. That address is incorrect, I said evenly. He glanced down. This is 214 Maple Lane, right? Yes, that's what I have. I didn't touch the box. Return to sender, I said. He shrugged and carried it back to the truck. I stood there long after he drove away. He had used my address. He hadn't even bothered to change it. The arrogance of that settled deep. I went back inside and wrote it down in my notebook. Attempted shipment to my home. Name, Caleb Carver. Electronics retailer. This was no longer about proving my competence. It was about proving his intent, and piece by piece the picture was assembling itself. Not as a worried son, but as a man who believed my money was already his. I closed the notebook gently. If he wanted to test my limits, he was about to discover that I still had plenty. I didn't wait for Monday. By Saturday morning, I was seated inside the Financial Crimes Division at the local police department, my defense folder thicker than it had been 3 days ago. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Across from me sat Detective Alvarez, a woman with steady eyes and a notebook already open. Start from the beginning, she said. So I did. Guardianship petition. Unauthorized password reset. Attempted cosigner addition. Credit card test charges. Overnight electronics order shipped to my address under my son's name. Welfare check initiated against me. I laid out every document in chronological order. No theatrics, no trembling voice. Just sequence. She flipped through the bank logs first. Device access registered locally, she murmured. And you've frozen all accounts? Yes. Added verbal password protection. No new beneficiaries without in-person verification. She nodded approvingly. And you believe your son initiated these transactions? I believe the timing aligns with his guardianship filing, I said carefully. And I believe the shipments were routed through my address. That's not proof, she said. No, I agreed. It's pattern. She looked at me again, longer this time. Mrs. Carver, filing for guardianship isn't illegal, but accessing someone's accounts without authorization is. I understand. Do you have evidence he physically removed password information from your home? The envelope is missing. He was present in the house. No sign of forced entry. She scribbled notes. We can subpoena IP logs from the bank and retailer. If they tie to his device or residence, that's significant. Will you? I asked. If the fraud department escalates and your attorney pushes, yes. I slid Dana's card across the table. Detective Alvarez gave a small nod. Good. You're organized. I bake by weight, not by guess, I replied. For the first time, her mouth twitched. She leaned back. Let me ask you something directly. Has your son expressed financial strain? Yes. Debt collectors? I don't know. Substance issues? No. Lifestyle change recently? I hesitated. He mentioned a business opportunity. Needed liquidity. That fits, she said quietly. The room felt very still. Mrs. Carver, she continued, cases like this are complicated because they mix money with family. Many victims hesitate. You haven't. I don't intend to, I said. She closed the folder gently. We'll open a preliminary investigation. I can't promise charges yet, but we will request digital traces. Preliminary investigation. That meant official. When I stepped outside the building, the autumn air felt sharper, almost metallic. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. My phone buzzed as if on cue. Caleb, I heard you went to the police, so he had contacts there too. Or maybe word traveled faster than I thought. I didn't answer immediately. Another message followed. Caleb, this is insane. You're accusing your own son of crimes. I typed slowly. Ruth, I am reporting unauthorized access to my accounts. 3 dots appeared. Caleb, you're blowing this out of proportion. Ruth, then you should welcome an investigation. Silence. I slipped my phone into my purse and walked toward my car. On the way home, I stopped at a small Italian market and bought pecorino, olives, and a slice of pistachio torta, not as comfort, as ritual. When I arrived home, the security system technicians were finishing installation. Cameras covered the front porch, back door, and hallway, leading to my office. Everything uploads to encrypted cloud storage, the young installer said. Even if the system's tampered with, footage is preserved. Good, I replied. That evening, I received an email confirmation from the credit bureau. Fraud alert placed. New credit line frozen. Every door he'd tried to open was closing. And yet, I knew this wasn't the end of escalation. Men who build narratives don't abandon them easily. They double down. I sat at my kitchen table again, looking at the guardianship case number printed in bold at the top of the document. He had chosen the courtroom. Now there was a police file too. The board was no longer private, and if he thought I would retreat because the stakes were higher, he had misunderstood something fundamental. I had already lived through childbirth without anesthesia in 1974. Paper threats did not scare me. They sharpened me. The official court notice arrived by certified mail 3 days later. I signed for it myself. Guardianship hearing. Scheduled. Temporary authority request. Pending review. Temporary authority. He wasn't just asking to control my accounts eventually. He was asking the court to grant him interim control before the hearing to prevent financial harm. I read the phrase twice. Financial harm. As if I were the hazard. I called Dana immediately. They're requesting temporary authority, I said. I saw, she replied. We're filing an objection today. We'll attach your fraud reports, police case number, and credit freeze confirmation. Can he get it approved before I speak in court? Only if a judge believes there's imminent risk. There is, I said quietly. Yes, she answered, just not from you. That afternoon, Caleb showed up again. Not at my house this time. At my bank. I was there reviewing additional access logs when the front doors opened, and he walked in wearing a charcoal suit I'd never seen before. He looked composed, almost polished. He spotted me immediately. So this is what we're doing now? He said, approaching the desk. What are we doing? I asked calmly. You're making a spectacle. I'm reviewing my accounts. He turned to the branch manager. I'm her son. There's a guardianship petition in process. And there is also a restriction on access, the manager replied evenly. We've been instructed by Mrs. Carver's attorney. Caleb's jaw flexed. Mom, he said quietly, lowering his voice, if the judge grants temporary authority, I can reverse all this chaos. Reverse what? I asked. The fraud alerts? He inhaled sharply. You're twisting everything. Am I? I slid the latest printout across the desk. This shows 3 login attempts from a device traced within 2 miles of your apartment. His eyes flicked to the paper. Just once. Then back to me. You don't understand IP routing, he said. Do you? I replied. The branch manager cleared his throat. Mr. Carver, unless you have legal documentation granting authority, you cannot discuss these accounts. Caleb smiled tightly. Soon. That word lingered. Soon. When he left, the manager leaned slightly closer to me. Mrs. Carver, we've received a formal inquiry from his attorney requesting account summaries. Without my consent? Yes, we declined pending court instruction. I nodded. Document that. Already done. I left the bank feeling something I hadn't expected. Not fear. Timing. He was accelerating, pushing for temporary control before the evidence could fully solidify. If granted, even briefly, he could reposition funds under the guise of management. At home, I reviewed the court filing. Dana forwarded me. His affidavit described me as increasingly forgetful, financially impulsive, and vulnerable to manipulation. He cited the steakhouse charge I never made as evidence of uncharacteristic spending. I read the line twice. Uncharacteristic spending. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements from the past 3 years. Groceries, utilities, property taxes, charitable donations, no luxury indulgences, no erratic transfers. I printed them all. Then I printed something else. Photos from the security camera of him entering my house the afternoon before the unauthorized login. Time stamped. Clear. I placed everything into the defense folder, now thick enough to require a binder clip. That evening, Dana called again. We've secured the cognitive evaluation appointment for tomorrow morning, she said. Top-rated neuropsychologist, comprehensive battery. I'll be there. If you pass cleanly, it severely weakens his temporary authority argument. I will pass, I said. She paused. Ruth, are you prepared for him to testify against you? Yes, I answered. Because somewhere between the first password reset and this moment, I had stopped seeing him as my son in this fight. In court, he would not be Caleb. He would be the petitioner, and I would be the respondent with evidence. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. again and laid out my clothes carefully. Navy blouse, pressed slacks, low heels. Not defensive, deliberate. If he wanted temporary control, he was going to have to look me in the eye while asking for it, and I would make sure the judge had already seen the full picture. The neuropsychologist's office was nothing like a courtroom. It was quiet, almost clinical in its neutrality. Beige walls, a faint scent of antiseptic and coffee. A framed print of a Monet water lily above the reception desk, soft and deliberately calming. Dr. Elaine Mercer greeted me with a firm handshake. Mrs. Carver, I understand this evaluation is connected to a legal proceeding. Yes, I said. Guardianship petition. She nodded once. No sympathy, no suspicion, just procedure. For the record, she began once we were seated in her office, this assessment will measure memory, executive functioning, reasoning, financial judgment, attention, and orientation. It is comprehensive. Good, I replied. The first tests were simple. Recall a list of words. Repeat numbers backward. Identify patterns and sequences. I moved through them steadily, like solving crossword puzzles on a Sunday morning. Then came the executive tasks: hypothetical budgeting scenarios, investment risk analysis, fraud detection reasoning. If someone emails requesting urgent wire transfer access, she asked, how would you respond? I wouldn't respond, I said. I would independently verify through a known channel, and I would never wire funds based on urgency language. She made a note. We moved into delayed recall. She asked me to retrieve the original word list from earlier. I did. Not perfectly, but within normal range. Time passed without drama. No trick questions, no theatrics, just cognition measured cleanly. At one point, she leaned back and asked, "Do you feel confused about your finances?" "No," I said. "Do you feel overwhelmed?" "I feel challenged." "By what?" "By a legal narrative that does not reflect my functioning." She watched me carefully. "Do you believe your son is acting maliciously?" I paused. "I believe he is acting in self-interest." Another note. After nearly 3 hours, she closed the folder. "Mrs. Carver," she said calmly, "based on today's assessment, I find no evidence of cognitive impairment. Your executive functioning and financial reasoning are intact." The words didn't make me emotional. They made me steady. "Will you put that in writing?" I asked. "It will be formalized in a report submitted to your attorney." I thanked her, stood, and walked out into the crisp afternoon air feeling something new. Not relief. Positioning. When I arrived home, an email from Dana was waiting. Subject: emergency motion filed. Caleb's attorney had pushed again for temporary authority, citing escalating instability due to my involvement with law enforcement. In other words, reporting fraud was now being framed as evidence of paranoia. I called Dana immediately. "They're using the police report against me?" I asked. "They're trying to spin it as emotional escalation," she said. "But once we submit your evaluation, that argument collapses." "Has the judge reviewed the file yet?" "Tomorrow morning." The timing aligned almost too cleanly. That evening, I received another message from Caleb. "Caleb, you're exhausting yourself. Ruth, I completed a 3-hour neuropsychological assessment today." A pause. "Caleb, that's unnecessary." Ruth, the doctor disagrees. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared twice before his reply came. "Caleb, you think a test changes the fact that you're vulnerable?" I stared at that word. Vulnerable. "Yes," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "To you." But I didn't send that. Instead, I wrote, "Ruth, we'll let the court decide." I set my phone down and walked through my house slowly, cameras blinking quietly, documents stacked precisely, fraud alerts active, police case number logged, attorney engaged, everything documented, everything deliberate. If the judge granted temporary authority tomorrow, it wouldn't be because I had failed to prepare. It would be because the narrative outweighed the evidence. And I had a feeling that tomorrow, for the first time, Caleb would realize something important. He wasn't facing a confused old woman. He was facing documentation, evaluation, and a mother who had finally stopped protecting him from consequences. I slept that night without waking once. Because whatever happened in that courtroom, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was not slipping. I was fighting. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand drama, no towering ceilings, just polished wood benches, fluorescent lighting, and a judge who looked like he had very little patience for theatrics. Caleb sat at the petitioner's table in a navy suit, posture straight, jaw tight. His attorney whispered something to him as I took my seat beside Dana. He didn't look at me. The clerk called the case. In the matter of Carver versus Carver, petition for guardianship and temporary authority. Petition for guardianship. Hearing it spoken aloud felt like someone trying to rename me. Caleb's attorney stood first. Smooth voice. Controlled cadence. Your Honor, Mr. Carver is acting out of concern. His mother has demonstrated financial instability, susceptibility to scams, and escalating paranoia, including filing police reports against her own son. Paranoia. There it was again. He referenced the steakhouse charge, the electronics order, my erratic freezing of accounts. Then he said it. We are requesting temporary authority to prevent further financial harm while full evaluation is pending. Dana stood slowly. Your Honor, she began, the respondent has already completed an independent neuropsychological evaluation. We have the written report. She handed it to the clerk. Caleb's head turned sharply toward me for the first time. Dana continued. The assessment confirms intact executive functioning, sound financial reasoning, and no cognitive impairment. Furthermore, the respondent has filed documented fraud reports supported by bank access logs showing unauthorized login attempts from a device traced locally. The judge adjusted his glasses and flipped through the pages. Do we have these logs? He asked. Yes, Your Honor. They were handed up. The courtroom went quiet, except for the soft shuffle of paper. Then the judge looked up at Caleb's attorney. You're alleging financial mismanagement. Yet I see no evidence of irrational spending patterns. In fact, I see proactive fraud mitigation. Caleb shifted in his chair. His attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, sometimes individuals with cognitive decline appear functional in structured environments. Dr. Mercer's report specifically addresses that, the judge interrupted. Comprehensive battery, no impairment. Dana didn't smile. She didn't need to. The judge turned toward me. Mrs. Carver, do you wish to make a statement? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. My voice didn't waver. I have managed my finances independently for decades. When I discovered unauthorized account access and fraudulent charges, I froze my accounts and reported the activity. My son then initiated a guardianship petition, citing the very fraud I reported as evidence of instability. I paused only once. I am not declining. I am defending. The room felt tight. Caleb's attorney rose again. Your Honor, the petitioner believes his mother is vulnerable to manipulation. Dana cut in smoothly. The only documented manipulation in this file is attempted unauthorized access to her financial accounts. Silence. The judge leaned back slightly. Mr. Carver, he said, addressing Caleb directly. Did you access your mother's accounts? Caleb hesitated, just a fraction too long. I was trying to help, he said finally. That was not my question. I may have attempted to review activity. Without authorization? The judge pressed. His attorney shifted uncomfortably. Caleb swallowed. I had reason to be concerned. Right there. The silence before his answer. You can almost hear the courtroom air tighten. When someone says, I was helping, instead of no, what would you think? What would you do in Ruth's place? Tell me in the comments. The judge exhaled slowly. Temporary authority is denied, he said firmly. Given the evaluation and documented evidence of proactive financial protection, I find no basis for emergency control. A quiet wave passed through the room, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, he added, if evidence of unauthorized access is substantiated, This court may view the petition itself as strategic rather than protective. Caleb's face lost color. The petition wasn't dismissed entirely. That would come later. But the temporary control he had rushed to secure was gone. Denied. As we stepped into the hallway afterward, Caleb finally looked at me. "You've turned this into war," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "You did." Dana touched my elbow gently. "We're not finished," she murmured. But today was decisive. Decisive. For the first time since he laid those papers on my kitchen table, the narrative had shifted publicly. Not confused mother, not paranoid elder, documented respondent. And the judge had seen it. I walked out of that courthouse without leaning on anyone, not because I needed to prove something, but because I didn't. 2 days after the hearing, Dana filed the civil complaint. Financial exploitation, unauthorized access, attempted fraudulent transfer, emotional distress tied to coercive guardianship filing. Seeing my son's name listed as defendant felt surreal. Clean font, black ink. No emotion attached to it, just allegation and evidence. "Once he's served," Dana explained, "his tone will change." "It already has," I said. And it had. Caleb stopped texting threats. He stopped using words like vulnerable and unstable. Instead, he sent something new. "Caleb, we can settle this privately." Privately. I called Dana before replying. "He wants to avoid discovery," she said immediately. "If we proceed, we subpoena device logs, IP traces, shipping records, bank communications." "So settlement helps him?" I said. "Yes. The question is whether it helps you." I thought about that carefully. "What would settlement look like?" I asked. "Restitution, written admission of unauthorized access, withdrawal of guardianship petition, legal fees covered. And no criminal referral? That would depend on negotiation." I looked around my kitchen. The same table where he'd laid out those papers like I was an object to be reassigned. "No," I said quietly. "I want it on record." That evening, Caleb showed up again. He didn't knock this time. The security camera alerted me before he reached the porch. I opened the door halfway, not inviting him inside. "You filed a lawsuit," he said. "Yes." "This is insane." "No," I replied calmly. "This is documented." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration breaking through his polished composure. "You're going to ruin me," he said. "I'm responding to what you attempted," I answered. "I never stole anything," he snapped. "The transfers never went through." "Because I froze the accounts," I said evenly. He exhaled sharply. "You're twisting intention. Intention is exactly what the court will examine." For a moment, he looked younger, not innocent, just cornered. "You don't understand how much pressure I'm under," he muttered. "Debt?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Instead, he tried one last pivot. "You're my mother." "Yes." "You're supposed to protect me." There it was. The root. "I protected you your entire life," I said. "I protected you from scraped knees, from failing grades, from consequences. But I will not protect you from this." His eyes hardened. "You'd testify against me?" "If required." Silence settled between us. "You've changed," he said. "No," I replied softly. I stopped absorbing. He looked like he wanted to argue again, but something in my posture must have told him it was futile. "This isn't over," he said finally. "No," I agreed. It isn't. After he left, I closed the door and checked the camera footage. Time-stamped, stored off-site. Everything preserved. The next morning, he was formally served. Dana called mid-afternoon. He's retained separate counsel, she said. And he's requested mediation. Already? Yes. That's fast. He didn't expect you to escalate. Escalate. I smiled faintly at the word. He had filed first. He had petitioned first. He had attempted access first. But when I responded proportionally, it became escalation. Later that night, an email arrived from Detective Alvarez. Subpoena request approved for device and IP logs. It was moving, not emotionally, legally. I sat at my kitchen table again and opened my notebook. I wrote one sentence. This is no longer about control. It is about accountability. I closed the notebook carefully. If Caleb believed I would fold once lawyers and subpoenas entered the room, he still misunderstood me. I had raised him. I knew exactly how stubborn he could be. What he hadn't realized yet was that he got that from me. Mediation was scheduled for the following Thursday. Neutral office, long table, water pitchers no one would touch, 2 attorneys, a retired judge acting as mediator. And Caleb seated across from me, not as my son, but as a defendant advised to keep his sentences short. His new attorney, Mr. Halpern, opened with a tone that tried to sound reasonable. We're here to resolve this without further damage to family relationships. Family relationships. I almost admired the phrasing. Dana didn't respond emotionally. We're here to address documented unauthorized access and a coercive guardianship filing. The mediator leaned forward slightly. Let's focus on solutions. Solutions implied mutual fault. I folded my hands calmly on the table. Halpern slid a proposal across to Dana. Withdrawal of guardianship petition, confidential settlement, partial reimbursement of legal fees, no admission of wrongdoing, no admission. Dana glanced at me before speaking. And the fraudulent login attempts? Misunderstanding, Halpern said smoothly. The credit card applications? Dana asked. Administrative confusion? The shipment to her address under Mr. Carver's name? Coincidental overlap. Coincidental. I looked at Caleb directly for the first time since we entered the room. You used my address, I said quietly. He didn't meet my eyes. Halpern intervened. Mrs. Carver, litigation will expose both sides to scrutiny. Discovery can be invasive. I have nothing to hide, I replied. Caleb finally spoke. You're going to humiliate me publicly. You attempted to declare me incompetent, I said evenly. In public. The mediator cleared his throat gently. Mr. Carver, can you explain the login attempts? Caleb shifted. I was trying to monitor suspicious activity. By changing her password? Dana asked. Silence. The mediator turned to Halpern. If digital forensics confirm unauthorized access from your client's device, the civil exposure increases substantially. Halpern's composure thinned slightly. That's speculative, he said. Subpoenas are not, Dana replied. There it was. The real pressure point. Caleb leaned back, jaw tight. This is overkill, he muttered. No, I said calmly. This is proportion. Halpern requested a private caucus. Caleb and his attorney moved to another room. Dana remained seated beside me. He's nervous, she murmured. He should be, I replied. 15 minutes later, they returned. Revised offer. Full reimbursement of my legal fees. Formal written statement withdrawing all claims of cognitive impairment. Agreement to pay a financial penalty labeled as civil restitution. Guardianship petition dismissed with prejudice. Still no explicit admission of fraud. I studied Caleb's face while Dana reviewed the language. He looked exhausted, not repentant. Exhausted. "Do you accept responsibility?" I asked him directly. Halpern interjected. "We're not here for emotional admissions." "I am," I said quietly. Caleb's eyes flickered toward mine. "I made mistakes," he said. "That is not the same," I replied. His voice dropped. "I thought you wouldn't notice." The room went very still. Halpern stiffened. "That statement is not—" "I thought you wouldn't notice," Caleb repeated, almost under his breath. Dana didn't interrupt. The mediator didn't speak. I held his gaze. "You tried to put me under custody to cover it," I said. He didn't deny it. I turned back to Dana. "I want the restitution. I want the petition dismissed with prejudice. I want written acknowledgement that I am legally competent. And I want the civil record preserved." Halpern exhaled slowly. "Preserved record limits confidentiality." "I am not seeking secrecy," I said. Caleb looked at me like he was seeing something for the first time. "You'd really let this stand in court records?" he asked. "Yes." The mediator nodded thoughtfully. "That is within her rights." There was no shouting, no dramatic outburst, just gravity. Caleb's shoulders lowered slightly. "Fine," he said quietly. The settlement language was adjusted. Signatures were placed. Initials marked beside each clause. When I signed, my hand remained steady. This wasn't victory, it was consequence. As we stood to leave, Caleb hesitated near the door. "You didn't have to go this far," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I did." He opened his mouth as if to argue again, but nothing came out, because somewhere along the way, the story he had built about a confused old woman had collapsed under timestamps, evaluations, and his own words, and now it would exist not as rumor, but as record. The settlement was finalized 3 days later. Filed, stamped, entered into record. Guardianship petition dismissed with prejudice, meaning he could not refile the same claim. Civil restitution agreed. Legal fees reimbursed. Formal written acknowledgement of my cognitive competence included in the closing documentation. Dana handed me the certified copy in her office. "It's done," she said. "Not quite," I replied, because while the civil matter had resolved, Detective Alvarez's email arrived that same afternoon. Digital forensic analysis confirmed unauthorized login attempts originated from a device registered to Caleb's apartment complex. The electronics retailer provided shipping metadata tied to his account credentials. The declined credit applications traced back to the same IP cluster. Pattern, not coincidence. I called Dana. "He admitted he thought I wouldn't notice," I said. "Yes." "And now there's digital confirmation." "Yes." There was a pause. "The district attorney may choose to pursue charges," she added. "That decision is not yours." "I understand." And I did. For the first time since this began, the momentum was no longer mine to control. Evidence had moved beyond civil dispute. That evening, Caleb called instead of texting. I let it ring twice before answering. "What now?" he asked quietly. "The settlement stands," I said. "I know." "They confirmed the IP logs." Silence. "I was going to fix it," he said finally. "With my money?" I asked. "I was under pressure." "You tried to put me under legal custody to hide it." He exhaled sharply. I panicked. "Yes," I said. "You did." There was no shouting left between us. just tired truth. "Are you pressing criminal charges?" he asked. "I reported unauthorized access," I replied. "The rest is not up to me." He was quiet for a long moment. "They're going to destroy my career. You endangered my autonomy." Another silence. "I didn't think you'd fight," he said. "I didn't either," I answered honestly. That seemed to land harder than anything else. After we hung up, I sat alone in my kitchen, the same place where he had first laid those guardianship papers on the table like a leash. Now, the table was clear. No petitions. No highlighted bank statements. No threats dressed as protection. Just wood. Just space. The restitution funds had already been transferred back into my account under court supervision. I had directed a portion into a revocable trust with an independent fiduciary. The rest remained under strict monitoring protocols Dana helped establish. No single individual, not even family, could access without layered verification. Control restored. Not emotionally. Structurally. A week later, Detective Alvarez informed me the case had been forwarded to the district attorney's office for review. Whether charges would be filed depended on prosecutorial discretion and Caleb's cooperation. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mourn. I reorganized my files. I changed the locks. I updated my will. I replaced the ceramic dish by the phone where my checkbook used to sit. Not out of fear, out of clarity. The following Sunday, Aunt Linda came by again. This time without biscotti. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. "Will you ever forgive him?" I considered the question carefully. "Forgiveness," I said, "does not mean surrender." She nodded slowly. As she left, I watched her walk down the driveway and realized something simple. This was never about money alone. It was about narrative. He believed he could redefine me, confused, declining, manageable. Instead, the record now defined him: unauthorized access, dismissed petition, restitution agreement, and that record would not fade. That evening, I brewed tea, this time jasmine, and opened my notebook one last time. I wrote, "Autonomy is not given, it is defended." I closed the notebook gently, because the final piece wasn't legal. It was personal. And that part, I would decide myself. The letter from the district attorney arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. I opened it at the same kitchen table where everything had begun. After review of digital forensic evidence and civil admissions made during mediation, the office had decided to proceed with a deferred prosecution agreement. Caleb would avoid formal criminal charges if he completed financial ethics counseling, paid additional penalties, and remained free of further violations. Structured consequence, not prison, not nothing. I exhaled slowly. In the end, the law had chosen correction over destruction. Caleb called that night. "They offered me a deal," he said quietly. "I know. I'm taking it. That's wise." There was a long pause between us. "I didn't think it would go this far," he admitted. "You tried to make it go further," I said gently. "I was drowning," he whispered. "And you tried to use me as a life raft." Silence again. "I'm sorry," he said finally. The words didn't repair what had happened. They didn't erase the petition, the welfare check, the attempted custody of my autonomy. But they were real. "I hope you mean that," I replied. "I do. I won't rescue you from consequences," I said. "But I won't deny you the chance to change." Another pause. "Can we start over?" he asked. "Trust is rebuilt in layers," I answered. Not in requests. He didn't argue. After we hung up, I walked through my house slowly. The cameras were still active. The trust documents secured. The legal files archived in a labeled box on the top shelf of my closet. Nothing dramatic. Nothing broken. Just order. A week later, the guardianship case officially closed on the docket. No lingering motions. No pending appeals. Closed. I met Dana one final time to review the long-term protections now in place. Independent fiduciary oversight. Multi-factor verification on all financial accounts. Annual review clause. You've insulated yourself thoroughly, she said. I've learned, I replied. She smiled faintly. Most people never expect betrayal from inside the family. I didn't either. When I returned home that afternoon, I made something special, not out of comfort, but ceremony. A simple roast chicken with rosemary and lemon, crisp skin and golden edges. I plated it carefully, poured a small glass of wine, and sat down alone. Not lonely. Alone. There's a difference. I thought about the first day. Him sliding those papers across the table. The word custody written in bold ink like I was something to be managed. He had underestimated me. He had assumed age meant softness. That love meant compliance. That fear of family rupture would silence me. He was wrong. As for me, I didn't become harder. I became clearer. My son learned that custody is not control, that protection is not possession, that a mother's love does not equal access. And I learned something too. 74 is not fragile. It is seasoned. And if anyone ever tries again to rename my autonomy as vulnerability, they will find the same answer waiting. Not anger, not confusion, but documentation. And a woman who knows exactly where she stands. Dear friends, sometimes standing your ground is exhausting, but necessary. Was Ruth too harsh or just strong enough? Tell me in the comments. And if this story resonated, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it.